The world could literally be on the brink of an all-out war in the Middle East, as we've already seen lots of back and forth between Israel and Iran in recent months, starting with the embassy compounds of Iran that was destroyed by Israel in Syria, and then assassinations in Tehran, the capital city. Responses by Iran, which we have covered before back in April, where there were 350 drones and missiles that came in, all of which were either intercepted or knocked down, didn't hit anything important. And then now this latest barrage after yet another assassination by Israel against someone aligned with Iran, they now launched 180 missiles back and forth. As the world now waits to find out what could come next, we have a big treat for all of our viewers today. We have MIT professor Ted Postol back again, who's been just literally brilliant on describing exactly what we are actually seeing, debunking some of the false claims that some people are making when they're talking about how effective the air defense system is on the Israeli side, and probably as important as anything, what can we expect to come next? We always love to hit that here. First of all, Professor, just welcome back to the show. Always a pleasure.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. You guys are a great team.
So. Thank you very much. We appreciate that, and we're augmented by you. Before we get into the specific things that have happened in the last Iranian attack here a few days ago, I wonder if you could, first of all, tell us a little bit about the attack that happened to assassinate Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut. I think it was on the 30th of September when Israel took out the leader of Hezbollah. Because what we've seen in the West is just like these big explosions, a bunch of stuff, and then everybody says, well, he was in the middle of all that stuff and he died. But from what you were telling me before we came on air here, it was actually quite sophisticated.
Yes. This attack was tremendously sophisticated. Actually, the only person I have seen who described it really first relative to what I'm about to say was Scott Ritter, and I know enough about bombing and munitions to be in complete agreement with him on that. But what they did is this shelter was below some big buildings, and when you bomb a big building, the warhead hits the building. Depending on the fusing, it may go into the building a little ways, but it's not going to survive, so it detonates. And so what the Israelis apparently did is they had an enormous number of 2,000-pound bombs. These are sort of at the limit of what's generally available in the West for big bombs without very special weapons being used. And they used between 80 and 90 of these bombs, a tremendous amount of explosive power. And they first came in and they essentially leveled the area above the shelter. In other words, they turned the buildings above the shelter were kind of like a sort of a shield, a standoff shield. The buildings behaved like a detonation shield, causing the warheads to detonate far enough away from the surface below which the shelter exists to make it impossible, really, with blast damage, to collapse the shelter. So first, they essentially turned these buildings into rubble on the ground. And then they came in directly hitting the ground with more 2,000-pound bombs to collapse the shelter. So this was a gigantic effort. So this was an enormous, it was 160 tons of munitions to get a single target. Where, if you were trying to take out a single aircraft shelter and you had precision, 1-ton bomb would do enough. You destroy the airplane and the shelter. But they couldn't do that in this case because the shelter was very highly protected, not only from being buried deep, but also for having these, with these structures on top. So this was well thought out, obviously well executed, and a murderous attack.
Yeah, and I one of the reasons I wanted to highlight that is to show that whatever one may think about the morality of this, of the especially of the Israeli operations here, they should never be underestimated because they do have substantial firepower and apparently very accurate firepower. Is what you're telling
Yeah.
us.
Well, coming
Um,
from aircraft without having to evade air defenses, which the Israeli Air Force is now in a position to do, at least in South Lebanon. You can get very high accuracies. You know, 10 meters accuracy is not unreasonable from a modern aircraft when it's not trying to evade air defenses. So, so the precision is possible, and
yeah,
yeah,
especially as if you're outfitted and equipped and given all the bombs and stuff you need from other parties. But
yes,
anyway, I digress. All right, so I want to shift now to this recent episode here that happened when Iran retaliated in part for that very assassination with 100, reportedly 180 or 81 missiles of various types here. Now, what's been reported so far is that the Israeli air defense system of the Iron Dome, the Sling, and the Arrow system, that all of it basically got everything, and the whole operation was ineffective and inefficient. And unsuccessful is the phrase that kept being used by
right,
everybody.
right.
But you say that the actual video evidence doesn't quite support that. Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, all you have to do is look at the videos. This is a situation, as you may know, in 1991, a colleague and I debunked all the claims that were being made about the Patriots intercepting the Scud missiles over Israel. We showed in refereed scientific papers that the Patriot intercepted nothing. That was in 1991. Now, these ballistic missiles are longer range, so they move faster. And because they move faster, they're much more challenging targets than we should show that again in a second. They are much more challenging targets than the Scuds were, which moved at about 2 kilometers, 2.2 kilometers per second. These particular missiles travel at 3 kilometers per second because they're launched from longer range. And when you're trying to intercept such a missile, here's an example of an intercept right in front of us. Both cameras are showing the same intercept. This is from the Washington Post. And you can see when an intercept actually occurs, you have a giant fireball in the sky because the intercept detonates the warhead on the ballistic missile. And that warhead is big, and it creates a gigantic fireball in the sky. If you don't see a gigantic fireball, like is shown here, you don't have an intercept. If you see little fireballs, all you're seeing are the detonations of the interceptor warheads when they just detonate because they missed a target. And if you look at this particular video here, you don't see even those. Later on in this particular video, I don't think it's worth the time. You can see in the upper corner of the left video an interceptor detonating, and no big. There it is now,
Yeah,
up in
yeah.
the upper left corner.
And
That's
so
not an intercept.
that surprises me because I would expect with that number of incoming missiles that the interceptor, there would be plenty of interceptor missiles being fired, and even if they didn't hit, we would see more of those splashes. What do you think accounts for the paucity of the number of interceptor missiles?
Well, I think that the Israelis know that the interceptors have a near zero chance of actually hitting anything. And because the intercept probability is so low, you don't want to fire 20 or 30 or 40 interceptors on the chance you'll hit something, because it makes no difference when you have all these warheads coming in terms of the outcome. So why would you expend all these interceptors when they could be used? In fact, you will need them. I predict you will need them when the drones and the cruise missiles are used to attack Israel, which is another phase of this combat.
So your argument is, or your supposition, I suppose, is that uh, there's no point for Israel to. Well, they could identify what kind of missiles were coming in ahead of time, and they could decide go or no go on what to use. And if they felt like it would just be a waste of interceptors, not to fire at all. And yet, I guess we did see a couple. So apparently, some were sent off. Do you have any supposition of why they may have done these handful?
No, I don't. They are, of course, under some pressure to claim that they're making intercepts. You know, the Iron Dome has been falsely presented as having an 80%. I want to 80% intercept rate. I don't think this video in front of the audience now should provide a convincing evidence that they're intercepting 80% of these warheads. In fact, the evidence is zero in this particular video. What we're seeing now are the breakups of older missiles at higher altitudes. There was a mix of older missiles, which were presumably launched because they have them, and some of them will survive to the ground and explode, and also because they want to force the Israelis to shoot at things that may not be a serious threat. But the ones that are closer to the ground, where you see them stable, bright points of light, they're arriving probably at the Nevatim airbase. And those are the modern warheads. Those warheads have separated from the ballistic bodies of the ballistic missiles, and they're pretty stable. You can see they don't have big contrails coming off them, and they're relatively accurate. We have an estimate now. We now have a good first order estimate of the accuracy of the best, most modern, long range ballistic missiles.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because that's, I think, really important. How accurate are the missiles, and therefore, what is the risk to Israel of future rounds?
Well, it's not that these missiles don't do any damage. The chances are they cannot target with any confidence any kind of singular or hardened structure, because the accuracy of the missile is pretty much around 2 kilometers. I want to thank a graduate student at Portland State University, Wesley Toland, who sent me a bunch of materials last night. And Wesley allowed me to do this analysis because he sent me this data. So thank you, Wesley.
Yeah, if you could then show us what the circular, the CEP, I think it's called, the
CEP,
as it relates to the Nevatim airbase attack.
Yes, if we can have slide 3, numeral 3, from the slide stack. There we are. This is a figure published by the Monterey Institute of what they say are impact points they've identified. It's not possible for me to verify the accuracy of this claim, but it's probably roughly correct. So if you take this data and you say, okay, if I draw a circle around the dominant impact points, that's in slide 4. I will get 75 to 80% of the warheads relative what's called the CEP, the circular error probable, associated with a ballistic missile. So this if we look at the next slide, we have some ground distance data I obtained independently from a Google map. And we know that the diameter of this rough circle is about 4.5 kilometers, which means that the CEP, which is defined as the circle, the circle in which half of the warheads fall and half of the rest of the warheads fall outside that circle, is about 2.2 kilometers. So if we just look at slide 6, I'm showing you twice the CEP, and the circle of half the diameter would be the CEP, which is about 2.2 kilometers. And I'd say, this is very rough, plus or minus 0.1 or 0.2 kilometers. But it's
So let
good
me ask,
enough.
when you're the Iranian side and you want to target the base, do you say, all right, I want to target this hardened shelter, that command control center building, et cetera, or do you just like put a pin in the middle of a 2-kilometer circle and just say, I hope some of it hits what I want?
That's what they do. They just, that's what they're aiming at. And if you look at this particular map to the right side, you can see 3 pins that are roughly together.
Yeah.
And one of those pins show an impact point that went right through the ceiling of a hardened shelter. There is no doubt. There's close-ups of that. Unfortunately, I'm working toward a deadline with you guys.
Yeah. Gary, don't you have some video? Yeah, Gary's got one that shows
There's a
that.
very good. In the rightmost box there, you can see what looks like 5 shelters next to, up against each other, and one of them has a grayish circular area on top. That shelter was hit. There are some very good close-ups. Maybe the next time we come on, I can show them to you or send them to you later. That's an accidental hit. I mean, it's not to mean it's unimportant, but it's a hit. And there was probably a very valuable aircraft in that shelter. Some claims were made that it was an AWACS, an Israeli AWACS aircraft, the airborne warning and control plane. That's not something easy, that's cost free to lose. And others have claimed it was an F-35, stealth aircraft. There's no way for me to know what was in it.
Definitely,
but it was something valuable.
Yeah.
So
just the shelter was. So in terms of like capabilities, if the Assad is going to use this technology and they want to strike a target, they're going to have to saturate. Like if they actually wanted to take out the base, you'd have to have quadruple the number of missiles so that at least enough of them fall inside and hit. Is that a fair statement?
I think if you used all of the missiles they had, all of them, and targeted it on this location you're showing, they would probably not get enough concentration of blasts locally because it would be spread out over such a large distance that they would probably not destroy the headquarters. So the accuracy would be so low, and the density, they hit a lot of other things. This is not to say it would be cost-free for whoever they were shooting at. But if they were shooting at that Mossad headquarters and their objective was to collapse the headquarters, it would be nearly improbable. I can do the arithmetic for you for the next discussion if you want, but I'd put it at one chance in a few hundred, for the attack.
Yeah. So then let's see what and we're going to look at here in a minute about what may come next from both sides actually. But in terms of future risk to Israel, if Iran targets not an airbase out in the middle of the desert, but like say for example Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, where even if it's the rockets are wildly off, they could all strike important targets and kill people. I mean, is that the risk that Israel faces?
Well, I think if they only have ballistic missiles, which is not the case, they will do serious damage occasionally to targets that may or may not be of special interest to them, because the warheads are falling, over, let's say a 2-kilometer radius is, it's 30 or 40 square kilometers. It's they're falling over an area very large. The warheads are very lethal. We have images of some of the craters, but so if it lands on the top of a building, it's very likely to do very serious damage to the building, certainly if people were in the building, it would kill most of the people in it. Probably it would collapse the building, although in Israel, the buildings are built extra strong because the Israelis have started from the beginning worrying about being bombed. And they have very elaborate structural enhancements there. That's a great picture. And, that's that's a crater. In fact, there are other pictures of deeper, larger craters. It depends on the ground, the quality of the nature of the particular ground at impact. But, that's a crater that's probably 30 feet across, 35, 40 feet across. And there's
Okay, so
certainly are
I want
craters
to
that are
ask
bigger.
another question there based on something you just said. I said, well, in the future rounds, what would Iran have to do to put Israel at risk? But you said, well, if they only had these weapons, then it would be harder. But you say they have something besides. So what else do they have, and what threat could they pose to Israel if this went to a general war?
Well, if they have large numbers of cruise missiles and drones being much cheaper and slower, but also carrying bomb types of delivery vehicles, and cruise missiles, which are more expensive, travel faster, maybe 400 miles per hour, 500 miles per hour, rather than 200 miles per hour, 150 miles per hour. Those vehicles can have tremendous accuracy, and the Iranians have demonstrated that already. We can take a quick look. If you can give me slide 33 from the slide stack. Okay, this shows where holes put into fuel processing tanks at the Abqaiq fuel refining facility in Saudi Arabia, and those are Iranian cruise missiles that were used to attack those sites. Now, that precision with which you see these holes, they're all almost at the same location. That's not GPS precision. That's better than GPS precision. So if we look at the next slide, 34, what I've done in this particular case, I took a different image, satellite image, and I cross-correlated that satellite image with the targets that the Iranians went after, which was shown in the earlier slide. So if we look at slide 35, we can see the cross correlation. In the left, you can see these very peaked areas. The X and Y axis are the physical dimensions. The vertical dimension is the probability of hit, assuming that you're correlating what you're seeing in front of you. You have a camera, you look at the target as you approach it. The GPS has brought you close enough that you can see the target, and then you cross-correlate the image of the target you're going to see with the image of the target in front of you. And in 36, over slide 36, the next slide, you can see how those correlations work out. And the middle of each of those blots are where you should hit the target, and that's in fact what occurs as you saw in slide 33. So what this demonstrated unambiguously, I mean, again, to the eye of a technologist, what this demonstrated was that the Iranians have developed optical homing systems. They're not the most advanced optical homing systems. They require that you have reasonably symmetrical targets. They require that the target be known, that you have a reasonable estimate of the shape of the target, all of which are obtainable with satellite imagery these days. I mean, this is not unavailable.
Right.
So all you need is or pictures from the street, photographs from the street. and you have competent technical people, and the Iranians are tremendously competent. I think people should not underestimate this country.
So now let's go back to that Epcot attack. As I recall, at the time, there were Patriot air defense systems were set up near it, but they were oriented in the wrong direction, I think is what the claim was at the time. What capability does Israel have to defend against this same type of missile or rocket if Israel wanted to do it again? You mentioned earlier that they wanted to preserve their interceptors for targets that they had a chance to hit, which I assume cruise missiles and certainly drones would fit into that category.
Well, first of all, I doubt that the Patriots were oriented in the wrong direction, although it's possible. When I did the analysis, I'd have to go back because you do make mistakes, and so I want to be clear here. I had, at the time I did the estimate, I looked at what I thought was the approach trajectory of the cruise missiles that came in, and it looked to me like they came in over a populated area, an area with buildings, and that would have been the right choice for the attack direction, because if you imagine you're on the ground in Ebkak with a radar and you're looking in the direction of these buildings, the faces of the buildings cause tremendous radar reflections because those buildings are vertical. They give you a vertical face. And so when you're trying to discern an incoming vehicle that has an extremely small radar cross-section, it's like looking into the sun for a vehicle that's no brighter than a matchstick. So the clutter masks the arriving target. And it's quite possible that the Patriots were looking in the right direction. This Patriot system has been overstated, throughout its existence. And in the Gulf War of '91, they were claiming a tremendous intercept rate. I think even after we published article after article that showed that they were lying, the Army still claims today that they had a well over 70% intercept rate in the Gulf War of 1991. Let me assure you, the rate was zero. We had the data, zero, not 70%. So the lying about Patriot against ballistic missiles has been tremendous. Now, against aircraft, it is a very deadly system. It is very capable. I was extremely concerned during the Gulf War of 2003 when we, the Americans, shot down a British Tornado with the Patriot system, and we shot down an F-18. It was a tragic situation. I personally was involved because I was talking to the father of the pilot who was lied to repeatedly by the U.S. government. He lost his son. That's not a minor thing. And the Patriot was seeing false targets. The people operating the system had no idea what they were doing. They fired on this aircraft when they should never have fired on it. And there was no way so I started trying through open media, which I doubt my message, to say anybody who's in an airplane who's fired upon by a Patriot, you're in an airplane, you're scanning around. I don't fly, but I have a lot of friends who are pilots. You're always looking for the plume of an interceptor coming at you. And I said, if you see a plume and it's from a Patriot, and because there's only Patriots down there, you get out of that airplane. You do not try to evade that interceptor.
Israel carried
you just get out because you're going to lose your life.
Wow. So now let's circle back to what that could mean for Israel. What abilities do they have to defend against these kinds of missiles that do have pinpoint accuracy?
Well, what the Iranians are going to try to do, how well they do it is to be determined. There it is. There you go. You got a nice picture, Gary. That's good shot. And so what the what the Iranians are going to try to do is they're going to try to fly these drones in as low as they can. They're going to try to use ground clutter as much as they possibly can to mask the arriving drones. Now, the drones will have relatively large radar cross sections. They're not designed to be stealthy, and they're slow. So they will be observable when they get close to Israel by ground air defenses on the ground. Those air defenses, if they are patriots, will have a very high probability of kill against those drones. Of course, the drones can be in enormous numbers. I mean, there could be thousands of them. You only have hundreds of Patriot interceptors. I have no idea how many they have, but I doubt they have more than a few hundred interceptors. The interceptors are costing you between $2 and $5 million each, depending on whether it's what's called a PAC-1 or a PAC-3 interceptor. So you're expending multi-million-dollar interceptors against drones that are, tens of thousands, $0.01 million each. And so you exhaust the air defenses very, very easily. This is a drone that's different from the ones I'm talking about. It's a big drone. It's an expensive drone. But the drones I'm talking about are pretty much like the drones that the Ukrainians were using, which they very successfully used to exhaust. The Russians were using to very successfully exhaust the air defenses of Ukraine. The Ukrainians could not ignore these drones. They knew these drones were not aircraft because the radar systems can immediately tell the speed, and no aircraft is coming in with a relatively large radar cross section that slowly. But the drones have, a few hundred pounds of warhead on them, and they're very highly accurate. You don't want that thing running into your Patriot radar. You have to fire on it.
Yeah.
So you have to use interceptors. So what the Russians did is said, okay, you shoot them down, and then there was a lot of false reporting. In fact, it was around January of this year because I experienced it in a Stanford seminar where one of the so-called experts completely misstated what the situation was. Rose Gadamola, she was a deputy to Jan Stoltenberg, and had no idea what she's talking about. And she's complimenting the Ukrainian speaker on them shooting down all these worthless drones, when in fact at the time she made this statement, the Ukrainian air defenses were already exhausted, and the Russians were exploiting the exhaustion of the air defenses at Avdiivka, actually, where there was no air defense at all.
Right.
So
if you've got literally hundreds and possibly even in the thousands of drones to wave in there, the Israeli side will have to shoot them down, and whether that's with the U.S. aircraft, which apparently they're in the Gulf right now ready to do, or the Patriot systems, you still have a limited number of interceptors. And then following that, or would it be intermixed with that? Then they might bring in some of these other missiles. What in fact, let me ask the question this way. In your assessment, what is the most dangerous course of action the Iranian missiles could take that would put Israel at the greatest risk?
Well, what I would do if I were Iranian, they may be more clever than me, so I don't put it past them. I would have used these drones. They're kind of winged. They look like winged vehicles. They look like a P-38, but smaller. And not these four. Those are much smaller drones, but really a problem. But the longer range drone. I'm sorry, my senior moment there. I can't remember the name. Chavez, I think.
Shaheeds, yeah.
Yeah. And they have these drones of that type that have the range to reach Israel, and they can carry significant warheads. So I would, and they potentially, it seems to me they must have thousands of them. I'm just guessing. I don't know. But if I
We
had
had a
thousands,
CIA analyst on our show several months back, actually, that said they had somewhere around 10,000 at least.
okay, well, that makes the case then. Then I would use them initially. I would just send them in wave after wave after wave, and I would be picking targets that I want to take out because they have optical homing. And the next thing I would do is exhaust the ability of the Israelis. The Israelis would have a devil's choice. They could try to, yeah, that's a good shot. They could try to uh, shoot down drone. They could try to do goaltend, what I would call goaltending. The goaltending would be probably using the Iron Dome, because the Iron Dome interceptor is quite good against a slow-moving aerodynamic target. So you would probably try to use your Iron Dome. You'd probably deploy your Iron Dome defenses in a way that allows them to detect and engage drones relatively close, approaching target areas you want to defend. And then you would use them to shoot down the drones. But eventually you're going to run out of Iron Dome interceptors, even something like, and those interceptors maybe cost $100,000 each. So you're shooting down $10,000 or $20,000 drones with $100,000 interceptors. That's not a great exchange ratio also. But then after things have really gotten pretty bad, then I would start using cruise missiles. And in fact, I'd probably start mixing cruise missiles in with the drone attacks. So I'd launch a bunch of drones, wait a few hours because the cruise missiles are faster, and time the cruise missile launches so that the cruise missiles overtake the drones at about the time they're arriving in the area of the Israeli targets I'm shooting at, and saturate the system with both slow drones and fast cruise missiles. The cruise missiles will have a lot smaller radar cross section, and they'll be harder to detect, not necessarily non-detectable, but in the environment of building clutter and flying low, they will be a difficult target to engage. And I will start hitting targets of value because I will have the precision to do it. And that's what I expect in the end game. And that'll take time. That'll play out over time. This, of course, will be going on along with attacks from Hezbollah. I mean, Hezbollah has not been destroyed. The result of this initial shock to Hezbollah of killing off a large part of its command structure has clearly not had the effect that the Israelis were hoping for. And my guess is that the most experienced Israelis who are not nuts, and there are a lot of those who are not nuts. I mean, I have friends in Israel who I talk to, and they're not nuts, and they're reasonable people, and they are ethical. They just can't control the situation. The ones who are not nuts have predicted that Hezbollah would not collapse because this is an organization built from the ground up.
Yeah.
And you get young soldiers who, from the time they were maybe 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, have been training to fight against the Israelis, have known nothing in their life except attacks, killing people who they love and know. They're not going to say, oh, my leader has been killed. Those Israelis are coming across the border. I'm not going to fight. That's ridiculous. Of course they're going to fight. And as long as they're trained in close combat tactics, which it appears they are, they're going to do well. You're a soldier. You know why you train your soldiers so that when they're isolated, they can still fight.
Right.
And that's what you're looking at.
That's exactly right. So that would obviously represent quite a threat. So it's not exactly that this air defense system, this three-tiered situation, is impervious, and you've shown how it's almost the opposite of that. Let's look at the other half of this equation, and that's the Iranian side. if Israel makes good on its claim, and I can't imagine that they're not going to, that they're going to hit something and fire something really hard, do the Israeli missile forces, are they more capable than the Iranian forces?
Well, they are very capable. I mean, the homing missiles that I'm not actually, I haven't ever actually looked at them in detail, but you can be sure that the Israeli missiles are very highly accurate. And if the Israelis choose to attack certain targets in Iran, they can do a lot of damage. I don't know what they'll do. I mean, maybe they'll go after oil refineries or oil fields. Um, they can try to kill leadership, but they're going to have to know where the people are. And after the little lessons that the leadership has already gotten from Ismail Haniyeh's murder, the leadership is going to be very careful, as is going to be the people in charge of protecting the leaders. So a lot of effort's going to go into making sure that the leaders can't be found. I mean, the United States tried to kill Saddam Hussein. There was no question we were trying to kill him. And we bombed these several areas. And in fact, I think we made announcements several times that we had killed him because we thought he was someplace. And we hit it with a whole bunch of a large number of very high yield munitions, like what was done against the Mossad headquarters. And we thought we killed them, but in fact we hadn't. So finding people is not so easy. And as long as they're careful, communication security is absolutely essential. Anytime you emit a signal, the modern signal processing capabilities are fantastic. So you can be located very, very precisely and potentially very quickly. And so you really have to maintain communication security. But there are ways of doing that.
Yeah.
And you're not dealing with a bunch of people who are running around the desert and live in tents. These are very sophisticated people.
And so I've also seen recently that Russia has, as part of their closening military engagement, has apparently given some S-400 systems to the Iranian side. But my question is whether it's the S-400, S-300s, or anything they may have developed independently. It sounds like that Israel is still going to be able to get some percentage of these missiles through regardless of that. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's true, but I think that they're going to have to be very careful with their aircraft if they're attacking with aircraft, because if they use aircraft to any extent in these attacks, they're going to lose some aircraft. And
how close do you have to be to the target to release your ordnance in the aircraft?
Well, it depends on the missiles they're launching. I mean, they could be hundreds of kilometers away if they're launching missiles with their own propulsive system. So that, that's a reasonably safe distance. But if they get to 40 or 50 kilometers away, if they're trying to release glide bombs and things, they're going to be in jeopardy. And if the Iran, I don't really know, you probably have other people who are more expert in the Iranian capabilities, but if the Iranians have any airborne radar systems, and my guess is they do, my guess is the Russians have probably sold them some. The S-400 and 500 have an over-the-horizon air defense capability. You're in an aircraft, you're flying, let's say at 30,000 feet, 10 kilometers, some altitude. You can see for 300 or 400 kilometers because the Earth's curvature is not limiting you. Yeah. And the S-300 and S-400 have long-range interceptors that can reach 300 and 400 kilometers. Mm. And those interceptors can be launched nearly instantly from commands from the airborne warning and control aircraft. This system has been modernized by the Russians in an extraordinarily clever ways. We saw this in Ukraine. The Russians were shooting down Ukrainian aircraft at 300, 400, and 400 kilometers and the aircraft had no idea what they were facing. Because what happened is a large interceptor was launched. The interceptor was below the horizon when it was launched. The aircraft pilot has no idea, none at all, what's happening. The missile, the interceptor is fired like a ballistic missile. So it's like a ballistic missile on a trajectory toward the aircraft. The aircraft is being tracked by the airborne warning and control aircraft, not by the ground-based interceptor system.
Mm.
And it sends information to the interceptor directly. The aircraft sends the information, not the ground-based system. And as this missile falls back into the atmosphere, it gains its speed, the original, very close to the launch speed, which is tremendous speed, and it's silent. So it's being guided under commands from the aircraft, and then at some point toward the end game, it turns on its own homing radar.
Mm.
The pilot never knows what hits them.
Wow.
And this is something the Israelis, I'm sure they understand this. I've worked with a lot of Israeli soldiers. They're very smart. They're very good military officers and very good military scientists. Some of them are my friends. And I'm sure they understand that this is a threat they're facing. So whether or not they have the aircraft, the Iranians have those aircraft, I don't know. But if I were Russia and trying to make life difficult for Israel or help the Iranians out, I would make sure they have some of these aircraft.
Well, I guess we're going to see, because at some point in the very near future, it seems virtually certain that Israel is going to launch some sort of attack against Iran. And I think it's equally as certain there's going to be some kind of response after that. And God only knows what's going to happen beyond this. But it's pretty clear that if these two sides are intent on firing each other, they're going to hit something. And this could explode into an all-out regional war, depending on what happens next.
Well, the terrible thing about this whole matter is that this has all been brought on by Netanyahu. And I won't speak for my Israeli friends, but I'll speak as an independent person who has some respect for Israel, not its government. I'm fed up with its government. I mean, its government is crazy. It's homicidal and genocidal. But there are a lot of Israeli citizens, not all, unfortunately. There are a lot of Israeli citizens who understand this terrible thing that their government is doing in their name. And I feel nothing but sympathy for them, but not for that government. And Netanyahu's going to go down in history having done unbelievable damage to Israel in the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's
He's not going to go down as any hero.
Yeah, so I've been arguing that from the beginning. That I mean, I'm talking about from even the Hamas fight, is that he had set his country on a political outcome of bringing security and peace to the Israeli people using military means that just cannot succeed, and it's just unfortunately playing out like that. And it could get a lot worse. But
it's going to get a lot worse. I'm afraid it's going to get a lot worse.
I think you're probably right. Well, Professor, thank you as always for coming on today. This has been an absolutely fascinating show. Very much appreciate you illuminating all of these facts, so we at least know what may come next. Thank you.
Well, take my advice. Take shelter.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be the case for everybody on both sides of that line.
Right.
And we thank you guys for coming on too. Always appreciate you. I ask you to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also to remind you, we are really getting into the podcast world here. Anywhere that you get your podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Podcast Addict, be sure and type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive. And you will be able to get us there and share with your friends so they know as well. Thank you very much. And we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.